My name is Daniel, I'm 24, and for the past year I've been in a relationship with Maria, who's 23. From the moment we started dating, I felt like we had something special. After 6 months, I asked her to move in with me in the capital. I had already built a stable life here, and I wanted to help her take the next step in her career. She had been living in a small town where opportunities were limited, so I thought this move could be life-changing for both of us. I covered all the expenses to make the transition easier for her. I didn't want her to feel financially pressured, and luckily, my job allowed me to support both of us. From my perspective, this was a win-win situation. She'd get a fresh start, and we'd finally be able to spend more time together without the constraints we had faced during the early months of our relationship. In those early months, however, things weren't so smooth. Maria's mother, Helena, exerted a significant amount of control over her. Helena wasn't outwardly aggressive or hostile. Instead, she had this way of subtly asserting power. For instance, she'd impose curfews on Maria or create sudden family obligations whenever I was in town. These seemingly small acts made it hard for Maria and me to enjoy uninterrupted time together. It was baffling because Maria is an accomplished, independent woman. She's lived abroad, held down challenging jobs, and proven herself capable in countless ways. Yet, under her mother's roof, Helena's influence was inescapable. When Maria moved in with me, I thought this dynamic would naturally shift, and it did to some extent, but not without complications. This isn't just about a mother being overly involved in her daughter's life. It's about how these behaviors started to affect me, our relationship, and ultimately, my perception of Helena. Even now, as I look back, I wonder, were my reactions justified? When Maria and I first started dating, I was immediately struck by her kindness and independence. She was the kind of person who seemed to have her life together, and I admired that. However, it didn't take long for me to realize that her independence had limits set by her mother, Helena. I'd visit Maria in her hometown whenever I could. It was a small, quiet place, but the atmosphere changed when Helena was involved. Our plans were constantly interrupted by sudden commitments Helena would invent. One time I had planned a whole afternoon out with Maria, but Helena called her away to help with something trivial, like rearranging furniture. It wasn't just inconvenient, it felt deliberate. Even when Maria was with me, there was this unspoken tension, like she was waiting for the next call or text from her mum. There were also curfews, which felt absurd given that Maria was in her 20s. Helena would insist she be home by 9 p.m. no matter what. If Maria resisted, Helena would frame it as a matter of respect or family values, making it harder for Maria to push back. It frustrated me because Maria had lived on her own before and was more than capable of managing her own life. At the time, I tried to be patient. I didn't want to come across as someone trying to drive a wedge between Maria and her family. But the reality was, Helena's behavior made it difficult for us to build a strong connection. Every visit felt like a battle for time and space, and it wasn't a battle I could win. These early challenges set the stage for the bigger issues that would come later. Even as I write this, I wonder if I handled those moments the right way, or if I should have done more to set boundaries early on. After 6 months of dating, I decided to ask Maria to move in with me. The idea came naturally. I had already been thinking about how much easier things would be for us if we didn't have to deal with the constant interruptions from her mother. Beyond that, I truly believed that moving to the capital would be a game changer for Maria's career. She's incredibly talented and hardworking, but the small-town environment wasn't offering her the opportunity she deserved. When I brought it up, Maria was hesitant at first. It wasn't about me. She was worried about how her mother would react. Helena wasn't just controlling, she was deeply invested in every aspect of Maria's life. Moving away felt like a statement of independence that Maria wasn't sure Helena would take well. Still, we decided to go for it. I assured Maria that she wouldn't have to worry about finances. I was in a stable position and could cover our expenses until she found her footing. I wanted her to feel supported, not burdened. The plan was to give her space to grow without the weight of external pressures, including Helena's. The move itself was exciting. For the first time, Maria and I could focus on building our life together without constant interference. She started applying for jobs, exploring new opportunities, and seemed happier than I'd ever seen her. But even with this physical distance, Helena's presence loomed. The daily phone calls started almost immediately, as did the subtle guilt trips. At first, I tried to shrug it off. She's just adjusting, I thought. But as the weeks went on, it became clear that Helena wasn't ready to let go and that her influence wasn't confined to the boundaries of her small town. At first, I tried to be understanding about the constant calls and messages from Helena. I told myself it was normal for a mother to want to stay connected to her daughter, especially after such a big change. But the frequency and tone of these interactions quickly became concerning. It wasn't just a simple, "How are you?" or a casual update. Helena's calls were often loaded with passive-aggressive comments or guilt-inducing remarks. One recurring issue was Helena's insistence on maintaining contact with Maria's ex-boyfriend. This wasn't just awkward, it was infuriating. Maria had confided in me that her ex had been toxic and manipulative, yet Helena continued to reach out to him as if they were best friends. Maria had asked her multiple times to stop, explaining how uncomfortable it made her, but Helena dismissed her concerns, claiming she didn't want to be rude. To me, it felt less about politeness and more about undermining Maria's boundaries. Helena also had a way of turning minor inconveniences into dramatic accusations. If Maria missed a call because she was busy working, Helena would suggest that I was somehow preventing her from answering. There was always this undercurrent of suspicion, like I had ulterior motives for wanting Maria to prioritize her own life. These behaviors started to weigh on me. I wanted to support Maria, but it was clear that Helena's actions were affecting her too. She'd get visibly stressed after certain conversations, her mood shifting from cheerful to anxious in a matter of minutes. I hated seeing her like that, especially knowing there wasn't much I could do to fix it. I began distancing myself from Helena, not out of spite, but out of a need to protect my own peace. I avoided calls, stayed out of her conversations with Maria, and tried to minimize my involvement. But even as I took a step back, it was clear that Helena wasn't going anywhere. And the more I withdrew, the more she seemed determined to pull me into her orbit. As time went on, my decision to distance myself from Helena only seemed to make things worse. She started voicing her discontent more openly, often directing it at Maria. If I didn't answer her calls or skipped out on family video chats, Helena would interpret it as a personal slight. "Why doesn't Daniel like me?" she'd ask Maria, her tone dripping with hurt. It wasn't a genuine question. It was a calculated move to make Maria feel guilty, and by extension, to pressure me into engaging. One of the most infuriating moments came when Helena accused me of isolating Maria from her family. Maria had been working late nights on a big project and wasn't as available for phone calls as usual. Instead of acknowledging Maria's hard work, Helena jumped to conclusions, suggesting I was keeping her too busy or encouraging her to ignore her mother. It was absurd, but the insinuation was enough to spark tension between Maria and me. Then came the comparisons to Maria's ex. Helena began to bring him up more frequently, contrasting his actions with mine. "At least he always made time to check in," she'd say. Knowing full well the history between them, it felt like a deliberate attempt to undermine my role in Maria's life, as if I had to prove myself worthy of her approval. These incidents left me feeling trapped. On one hand, I wanted to be the supportive partner Maria deserved. On the other, I couldn't keep subjecting myself to Helena's manipulative behavior. The stress was palpable. It hung over our home like a cloud, turning even the smallest interactions with Helena into a source of anxiety. I started questioning whether my approach was making things worse. Was avoiding Helena the right move, or was I inadvertently fueling her narrative? No matter what I did, it seemed like her disapproval only grew stronger, and for the first time I began to wonder if there was any way to fix this without compromising my own boundaries. As the end of the year approached, I found myself completely drained from dealing with Helena's constant interference. I made a conscious decision to focus on Maria and myself during the New Year celebrations. We planned a quiet night together, reflecting on our progress as a couple and looking ahead to the future. For once, I wanted to avoid the stress of navigating Helena's expectations. The night itself was perfect, peaceful, intimate, and exactly what we needed. It didn't even cross my mind to call Helena. To me, it wasn't a deliberate snub. It was simply a choice to prioritize our own happiness. But that decision didn't go unnoticed. The next day, Maria received a long, emotionally charged message from Helena. She was hurt that I hadn't reached out to wish her a happy new year, pointing out that even Maria's ex-boyfriend had called her. That comment stung more than I cared to admit. Helena wasn't just expressing disappointment, she was actively trying to sow doubt in Maria's mind about my character. Maria, to her credit, defended me. She explained that we had chosen to spend the evening disconnected from our phones and social media. But Helena wasn't satisfied. She accused Maria of making excuses for me, suggesting I didn't like her or respect her as part of the family. The conversation left Maria visibly upset, which only deepened my frustration. This incident reinforced my desire to keep my distance from Helena. Her comparisons and guilt trips felt manipulative and unnecessary, especially when they dragged Maria into the middle of it all. But at the same time, I couldn't help but wonder if I had been too dismissive. Could a simple call have avoided all this drama? Or would it have just delayed the inevitable confrontation? After the New Year incident, I knew it was time to have a serious conversation with Maria about her mother. I didn't want to cause unnecessary friction between us, but the situation with Helena was starting to take a toll on my mental well-being. More importantly, I could see how much it was affecting Maria, and that wasn't something I could ignore any longer. We sat down one evening, and I laid everything out. I told Maria how I felt about Helena's behavior, how the constant guilt trips, comparisons, and insinuations made me anxious and uncomfortable. I emphasized that my frustration wasn't directed at her, but at the way her mother's actions were impacting our relationship. To my relief, Maria listened without becoming defensive. In fact, she admitted that she had been feeling the same pressure for years, long before we met. Maria shared that standing up to Helena was incredibly difficult for her. Growing up, she had always been taught to prioritize family above all else, even at the expense of her own well-being. Moving to the city had been a liberating experience for her, but it also came with a heavy dose of guilt that Helena constantly reinforced. We talked about boundaries and how important they were for maintaining a healthy relationship, not just between me and Helena, but also between Maria and her mother. Maria agreed that things needed to change, but she also expressed concern about how to approach Helena without creating a bigger rift. By the end of our conversation, we were on the same page. Maria promised to take small steps towards setting clearer boundaries with her mother, while I committed to being patient and supportive. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it felt like a step in the right direction, one we hoped would bring some much-needed balance to our lives. Despite the steps Maria and I took to address the situation, Helena's influence remained a constant undercurrent in our relationship. Even during our happiest moments, there was a sense of unease lingering in the background. I couldn't help but feel that our dynamic as a couple was being shaped, in part, by how we managed Helena's presence in our lives. Maria was making an effort to set boundaries, but Helena wasn't making it easy. On days when Maria missed a call or didn't respond quickly enough, Helena would escalate her guilt tactics, sometimes leaving long, accusatory messages. Maria would try to brush it off, but I could see the toll it was taking. She'd become withdrawn or distracted, her mind clearly preoccupied with how to placate her mother without undermining her newfound independence. For me, the strain came from trying to balance my support for Maria with my own need for peace. I wanted to be a source of strength for her, but there were times when the stress felt overwhelming. I found myself dreading any mention of Helena, knowing it would likely lead to another round of tension or overanalysis. That said, Maria and I shared a deep connection that kept us grounded. We thrived in the moments when we could focus on each other, away from external pressures. Whether it was a lazy Sunday morning at home or celebrating a small win in her career, these pockets of joy reminded me why we were worth the effort. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that our relationship was being tested in ways it shouldn't have been. The situation with Helena wasn't just an annoyance, it was a recurring source of conflict that forced us to confront difficult questions about loyalty, boundaries, and the role of family in our lives. I often wondered, how much of this should I tolerate for the sake of love? And at what point does protecting our relationship mean drawing a firmer line, even if it risks further alienating Helena? As the months went by, I found myself increasingly torn between two conflicting desires: maintaining peace within our relationship and standing firm on my boundaries with Helena. The situation wasn't black and white, and that made it even harder to navigate. On one hand, I knew how important family was to Maria. So on the other, I couldn't ignore how much Helena's behavior was affecting my own mental health. I started second-guessing myself. Was I being too rigid by avoiding Helena? Could I have tried harder to engage with her, even if it felt uncomfortable? Every time I considered reaching out to smooth things over, though, I remembered how draining her interactions could be. Helena wasn't someone who respected boundaries easily, and any attempt to appease her seemed to come with strings attached. Maria, for her part, tried to reassure me. She acknowledged that her mother's behavior was out of line and appreciated my patience, but she also struggled with her own feelings of guilt. No matter how much progress we made as a couple, she couldn't fully shake the sense of obligation she felt toward Helena. It was as if she was caught between two worlds: the independent life she was building with me and the role her mother expected her to play. There were moments when I wondered if I was asking too much. After all, Helena was Maria's mother. Didn't I owe her some level of respect, even if I disagreed with her actions? But then I'd think about the constant stress and anxiety her behavior caused, and question whether my boundaries were not only justified but necessary. The more I reflected, the more I realized the heart of my dilemma. Was I protecting myself and our relationship, or was I just avoiding conflict? And if it was the latter, was that avoidance ultimately doing more harm than good? Looking back, it's clear that the challenges with Helena have shaped my relationship with Maria in ways I never anticipated. What started as minor annoyances, curfews, unexpected family obligations, constant phone calls, has spiraled into a recurring source of stress that I still haven't fully resolved. And the truth is, I'm not sure if I've handled it the right way. I've chosen distance as my primary coping mechanism, stepping back from interactions with Helena to preserve my own peace of mind. But in doing so, I may have inadvertently validated her narrative that I don't like or respect her. Maybe a different approach, one that involved more direct communication, could have led to a better outcome. Or maybe Helena's behavior is simply beyond my control, no matter how much effort I put in. The hardest part is knowing how much this impacts Maria. She's caught in the middle, trying to balance her loyalty to her mother with the life we're building together. I admire her strength and patience, but I also worry about how long we can sustain this dynamic without it causing deeper cracks in our relationship. As I sit here recounting everything, I find myself questioning not just Helena's actions, but my own. Have I been selfish for prioritizing my own comfort over maintaining a relationship with my partner's family? Or is it reasonable to draw a line when someone's behavior consistently disrupts your peace? That brings me to my question for you, the audience. Am I the one in the wrong here? Should I have tried harder to connect with Helena, or were my instincts to keep my distance justified? I don't have the answers, and maybe I never will. But I'd like to hear what you think. So tell me, am I the bad guy in this story?